This is Joseph Drust, and welcome back to another episode of AskZBrush. So we had a question sent in asking, how do the extractor brushes work? So to start off, I just have ZBrush loaded up, and I just have a polysphere here loaded in. So the question is asking about the extractor brushes. So these brushes are a set of standard brushes that have certain settings set up to be used with the from brush process. So as an example of this, if I have my sphere here, so let's go in and say sculpt a little design. Now after I have this design sculpted, let's say I want to extract this and then apply it to other parts of my mesh. So I can come over here to the brush palette, open this up. I can select the extractor brush here. I can then come across my stroke and drag and capture that brush stroke. And then now I can go to other parts of my model and apply that same detail. Now by default, if I just selected the extractor brush and try to use this on my model, this is the result I'm going to get. So the extractor brush itself is just a standard brush with different stroke settings applied. Now the power of the extractor comes from the from brush functionality, and this button lives in alpha from brush. Now if you hover over this button here, you'll see it has the hotkey of G. So the process to extract the details has nothing to do with the extractor brush, but rather this alpha from brush button here. So what this means is that this process can be used with any brushes inside of ZBrush. So to activate this, you just need to come over here and click this from brush option here, or press G on your keyboard. And this will now activate from brush. When from brush is active, you'll see you're going to get this different color crosshair. And now you want to just scale this up so it will engulf the details you want to extract. Now, after you have this sized, you just need to come across your model and click and drag across that detailed area. After this is done, that from brush process will take the sculptural detail, will create an alpha and a texture map if you have poly paint or texture information on your mesh. Now, once you have this captured, you can then apply this back to the surface of your model. So the key point to take note of here is that the extractor brushes are not performing the extraction of the detail from your mesh. The process that is doing that lives in the alpha, and it's this from brush button right here. So in order to extract the details from your model, you need to activate the from brush functionality, which can be done by clicking this button here in alpha or pressing G on your keyboard. Now when you extract the detail from your mesh, the from brush process is going to use three ways to grab that data. So here I have an example of three different spheres. So I have an A sphere, a B sphere, and a C sphere. Now on the first sphere here that's labeled with this A, this is going to demonstrate the first way the from brush process will grab the sculptural details from your model. So if we look at this model here, you can see it has this A that's been carved into it. And then if I navigate up here to the undo history bar, you'll see it has an undo history 1 of 1. So if I go to the alpha palette and click this from brush button here or press G on my keyboard, this is going to put me in the grab or the extract mode. Now, when this mode is used by default, it's going to look at the first undo history point and compare it to the current undo history point, and then extract the data between those 2 points. Now, since this model here only has one undo history point, there isn't multiple undo history points to compare data from. So ZBrush at this point is going to look at the surface of your model and use an algorithm to extract the data on there. So if I come across the model here and now click and drag to grab this A, you'll see I now have an alpha created, and now I can come across this model and click and drag to apply it to my mesh. Now if I come over here to the B sphere and click that, the B sphere here, you'll notice has a B sculpted into it. And if I come up to the undo history bar here, you'll see it has 12 points of undo history. Now if I come over to the alpha palette and now activate the from brush again or press G on my keyboard, what the from brush is going to do this time, it's going to look at the very first undo history point and compare it to my current undo history point, and then extract the details between those 2 points. So since this one has multiple undo history points, when I come across and extract this, it's going to do a comparison between this point and this point. Now you'll notice when I apply this to the mesh, this is the result I'm getting. So it's not as clean as that first extract I did on the A sphere. And this is because of these multiple undo history points. So you have to remember that ZBrush is looking at the first undo history point and comparing it to your current. So if I go back in time here to the first undo history point for sphere B, you'll notice this is what it looks like. So ZBrush is taking this at its first point of reference for that first undo history point, and it was comparing it to this point of reference And this is the result I'm getting. So ZBrush is calculating this correctly. However, that first undo history point looked like this. And so when it was comparing this mesh data to this mesh data, the result I am getting was something like this. Now, the third sphere here, if I come over here and select this, has a C carved into it, and you'll notice it also has those multiple undo history points. So let's say I don't want ZBrush to do that from brush process and grab the first undo and compare it to my current undo. So I just want to extract the C, so this part that is carved into it, and I don't want to do that large comparison between the first undo and the one I'm currently on. So what we can do is we can tell the from brush process which undo history point we want to grab from. So I'm going to come up here to my undo history point here and just go back in time till I get to the sphere that's rounded and smooth, but doesn't have that C carved into it. So now that I'm at that undo history point, what I can do is then come up here and hold Control and click. And this is going to apply this white rectangle. This is telling ZBrush when I click from brush, use this as the undo history point and compare it to the current one. So now if I go back to my C model here and go to Alpha, click the From Brush button or press G on my keyboard. Now if I do that same process of grabbing that C there, you'll see this is the result I'm going to get. So I'm getting the comparison of this mesh to this one, and it's extracting just that C out. So when I apply it, now I'm getting the result I'm looking for. So once again, to recap, if you have a subtool that currently only has one undo history point and you use the Alpha From Brush option to extract the sculptural detail, ZBrush is going to run an algorithm that's going to attempt to calculate the sculptural detail on the surface of the model and then extract it into an alpha and texture if you have polypaint enabled. If you have a model that has multiple undo history points and you use the From Brush option, ZBrush is going to look at the very first undo and compare that to your current undo and then extract the information. And option C, if you don't want the very first undo to be used as that point of reference, you can go back in time to your undo history point that you want to reference from, hold down Control and click to establish that as the first undo point. And then now you can go back to your current undo history point, activate the Alpha From Brush option by clicking this or pressing G, and then now you can extract that information, and then now you can come across and reapply it to your model. So that is the quick breakdown on the extractor brushes. So the extractor brushes themselves are just standard brushes that have different stroke settings applied to them so that they can work with the Alpha From Brush option. Now, From Brush can be used with any brush. It's not only set up with the extractor brushes. The extractor brushes are just set up with the appropriate settings. So when you extract something from your model, you can apply it back and it should look like the original part you extracted from. So if you have any other questions related to ZBrush pipelines or processes, please use the hashtag AskZBrush on Twitter. Happy ZBrushing!